Do not assume they are criminals or crazy people that need to be put down. Instead, look for the other narrative, the one that truly shows who these people were. They were people. They were friends, sisters, brothers, daughters, sons, cousins, people.
Black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by cops than white men.
They don't want us to succeed.
How much more do we have to take?
Evening, everyone. Another drop. Tonight, I want to talk real quick about propaganda, right? Propaganda and mental illness, stereotypes, issues surrounding it. And if you're watching through Facebook, I'm dropping some articles in the comments section. But I really just want to highlight some things that I think are really important to give the full picture of things here, right? When you see news stories or articles of people's like Elijah McClain, Ricardo Munoz, Walter Wallace, Ma'Khia Bryant, Daniel Prude, Angelo Quinto, Deanna Marie, Dola Eid, Dante Wright. Do not assume they're criminals or crazy people that need to be put down. Instead, look for the other narrative, the one that truly shows who these people were. They were people, they were friends, sisters, brothers, daughters, sons, cousins, people. Life is simple yet complicated, and people live simple yet complicated lives. Stop the judgment and look into who these people were and see they were not bad people. Also, what is a bad person? What makes a person bad? Is that a thing? I didn't know. Munoz and Wallace needed help. They needed care. A knife doesn't equal a death sentence. A knife doesn't mean they shouldn't be provided proper care. In fact, quite the opposite. They all need more love, more care, compassion, and attention. We all do, really, but some more than others. In 2015, I think it was, the Washington Post conducted the first ongoing tally of officer-involved shooting deaths of the mentally ill, right? And nationwide, at least 25% of the people who are shot and killed by police officers suffer from acute mental illness at the time of their death. People with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be fatally shot during an encounter with police than people with their mental illnesses under control. According to the Post 2018 tally, 1,165 civilians were fatally shot by police. Of those, more than 200 were confirmed to be mentally ill. Someone needs to be paying attention. Unarguably, mental illness isn't the only factor involved in fatal police encounters. Race is one that often is talked about, but the link of mental illness to police brutality doesn't have the same publicity. In 2015, the New York City Police Department responded to more than 400 mental health calls per day, more than 12,000 per month. But why do the police respond to mental health crisis, not EMTs? Historically and correctly, law enforcement has been paid to transport people suffering breakdowns to hospitals. And for many mental wards, police involvement is a requirement for involuntary admittance. In Washington State, for example, under almost all circumstances, police involvement is the primary factor in determining whether referral will result in commitment. This happens often enough that the state of Oklahoma's mental health department includes a budget line item specifically for reimbursing police to transport patients. The perception of people suffering mental illness as violent and dangerous is another reason police are called. Officers are the only people often perceived in the public to be able to de-escalate mental health crisis. According to the American Psychiatric Association, most people with mental illnesses are not violent, but using the law enforcement as a blunt instrument contributes to the stigma that they are. In fact, people with mental illnesses are more likely than others to be victims of a crime, not perpetuate them. Sorry. Progress is slow, and this may feel like an insurmountable problem, but there are things you can do to help. Contact your local House representative and let them know that you are fucking tired and done hearing about fatal police shootings. Read books like Breakdown, a clinician's experience in a broken system of emergency psychiatry, which describes why psychotic patients need involuntary commitments. Champion police body cameras and mandated government reporting of the role of mental illness in shootings. Advocate for mental health funding at all levels of government. If you are a police officer, rely on your crisis training to de-escalate crisis involving the mentally ill. Walter Wallace Jr., Ricardo Munoz, Angelo Quinto were all experiencing mental health episodes when they were killed by police officers. And their families called for help. Their deaths, along with many other similar cases, are once again highlighting concerns about whether law enforcement is equipped to handle such crises. More than 1 in 5 people fatally shot by police have mental illnesses, according to a Washington Post database of fatal U.S. shootings by on-duty police officers. And since 2015, when the Post launched that database, police have fatally shot more than 1,400 people with mental illnesses. It's fucking nuts. Angela Kimball, National Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, said she believes the numbers are so high because people in mental health crises do not always respond in ways officers want them to. Police are trained to respond to a situation with a goal of protecting public safety and their own safety, she said. They are using interventions that are designed to contain somebody that's perceived as a threat. And statistics are higher for Black men than any other demographic. Last month, the journal Annals of Epidemiology said in an analysis that police are more likely to shoot and kill unarmed Black men who show signs of mental illnesses than white men who exhibit similar behaviors. It's partly because Black men are least likely to get treatment for active mental health diagnosis among major demographics. Men ages 18 to 27 are also less likely to be treated. You intersect all those factors, and you have young black men who are most at risk, who may not be in treatment. And the reality is also black men are more likely to be deemed as a threat than any other demographic. Kimball also said that during mental health crisis, the presence of police officers coupled with the uniforms and shouting is quite often counterintuitive, and that it can lead to tragedy. As we know, that is a no-brainer. Angelo Quinto died in December of last year, days after an incident involving Antioch, California officers. His family had called the police for help because he was experiencing an episode of paranoia, according to a wrongful death claim. By the time officers arrived, Quinto's mother had been able to calm him down. She was holding him in her arms when officers took him away from her and laid him on his stomach. One officer crossed Quinto's leg behind him, while the other officer placed his knee on Quinto's neck for more than 4 minutes. Quinto became lifeless and was taken to a hospital where he died. Antioch Police Chief Tammany Brooks has denied that officers used the knee or anything else to put pressure on his neck. And Quinto's mother told reporters that the police handling of the situation was absolutely unnecessary. She said, "I trusted the police because I thought they knew what they were doing. But he was actually passive and visibly not dangerous or a threat," she said. And in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, police fatally shot Ricardo Munoz in September of last year after his sister called for help, saying he had become aggressive. In the audio of the 911 call played at a news conference, Munoz's sister told the dispatcher that he was schizophrenic and bipolar and asked that officials take him to a hospital. When an officer arrived at the home, Munoz exited with what authorities described as a hunting knife. Lancaster County District Attorney Heather Adams said at a news conference that Munoz immediately, without warning, charged the officer. The officer, quote unquote, ran for his life and fired 4 shots later, killing Munoz. And the officer was cleared. Adams said he responded as he had been trained and met deadly force with deadly force. And this is a problem. Munoz's sister has questioned why police did not have a different standard for people suffering mental health crisis. The right person should have been there, Relentis Munoz said. The first responder needs to be someone like a caseworker, someone who knows how to deal with this situation so the cops wouldn't be the first person to approach. Munoz's death echoes the killing in October of last year of Walter Wallace, who also was 27, who was fatally shot by police in Philadelphia responding to a call about mental health crisis. Walter Wallace's cousin has said the family knew how to pacify Wallace when he was having an episode. But on October 26th, they called 911 to request an ambulance in the hope that Wallace, who was bipolar, would receive medical intervention. A police officer arrived first. The incident was recorded on cell phone and police body camera video, which showed Wallace, a father of 8 children, being fatally shot in front of his mother and neighbors. In the police video, an officer yells for Wallace to put the knife down now as he walks down in front steps with an object in his hand. As Wallace walks across the street still holding what appeared to be a knife, the officer fired multiple rounds. Numbering fewer than 1 in 50 U.S. adults, individuals with untreated severe mental illnesses are involved in at least 1 in 4, and as many as half of all fatal police shootings. Because of this prevalence, reducing encounters between on-duty law enforcement and individuals with the most severe psychiatric diseases may represent the single most immediate practical strategy for reducing fatal police shootings in the U.S. Well, yeah. Keep these killers away from our most vulnerable That's a no-brainer to me. By dismantling the mental illness treatment system, we have turned mental health crises into from a medical issue into a police matter. This is patently unfair, illogical, and is proving harmful to both the individual in desperate need of care and the officer who is forced to respond. An expert says it should horrify but not surprise us that people with untreated mental illnesses are overrepresented in deadly encounters with law enforcement. Individuals with untreated mental illnesses are vastly overrepresented in every corner of the criminal justice system. Until we reform the public policies that we have, abandon them there, these tragic outcomes will continue. Wait.
Cutest thing I saw on Yubo.
And so nationwide protests last year over police accountability and racial justice have re-engineered long-standing efforts to fundamentally change how police departments respond to someone in a mental health emergency. Many are calling for removing or dramatically reducing law enforcement's role in responding to those crisis calls, unless absolutely necessary. Since 2015, nearly a quarter of all people killed by police officers in America have had a known mental illness. Injuries, too, are common, although they are less carefully tracked. There's anecdotal evidence that botched encounters between police and people in a mental crisis are up during the pandemic. And one of the many examples, the recent shooting of a distraught 13-year-old boy with an autism spectrum disorder by Salt Lake City police after his mother called officers to report that her son was having a mental breakdown. The teenager is recovering from serious wounds. Then you have the shooting of a homeless man crisis in Buffalo, New York, and Rochester. Rochester created, well, that's where Daniel Prude was executed by police, suffering a mental health crisis. Rochester had created one of New York State's first crisis intervention teams. And the March asphyxiation death of Daniel Prude there during a police confrontation, which had badly shaken the city and its police and political structure, offers a vivid example of the shortcomings and misreadings of what are called mental health and substance abuse crisis calls, or crisis intervention teams, otherwise known as CITs. Around 3 a.m. on March 23rd, Daniel Prude was unraveling. A light snow was falling when police confronted him. The 41-year-old black man was wandering the street naked and babbling. He was suffering a mental breakdown, exasperated by drug abuse. Officers handcuffed Prude and put a hood over his head, apparently to stop him from spitting at them. It was the early weeks of the coronavirus pandemic in the state. 3 officers pinned Prude to the ground as he became increasingly agitated. They pressed his face into the pavement for 2 minutes. One officer pushing heavily on Prude's head, according to the body cam. Prude stopped breathing. He was taken off life support at a hospital a week later. Joseph Prude, who was Daniel's brother, said he placed the phone call for his brother to get help, not for his brother to get lynched. Daniel Prude was having a mental breakdown and was on drugs. He had recently arrived at his brother's from Chicago, who had already been seen by a local hospital for erratic behavior and suicidal thoughts the previous day. A lawsuit by the Prude family says Prude was undergoing an acute manic psychotic episode. The Monroe County medical examiner ruled his death a homicide, citing asphyxia due to physical restraint by police and acute intoxication from the drug PCP as causes of death. We know what happened that night for Mr. Daniel Prude, and we don't want to see any more names. Many others in the mental health field in the city are trying to change how the police respond to these kinds of crisis calls. No handcuffs, no hoods. Yes to calm talk and careful de-escalation. Change your tone of voice, your body language. Hell, you might have to get on the ground with him. Give him eye contact. All of that is so important when de-escalating such a scale of an event. He was not well, speaks someone of the Prude case. Some Rochester police, in theory, were trained to do just that, to recognize and de-escalate confrontations with someone in a mental health breakdown, someone just like Daniel Prude. Rochester created its crisis intervention team in 2004 after a case similar to Prude's. These teams and their trainings grew out of Memphis in 1987 after police fatally shot Joseph Dwayne Robinson, another 27-year-old man who was in a mental health crisis and cutting himself with a butcher knife. CIT programs and training soon spread from Memphis to thousands of departments across the country. Yet despite the proliferation and popularity of what came to be called the Memphis model, some key people who advocate for the program say it has often been misapplied and misconstrued by law enforcement. If we can't abolish the systems in place outright tonight, albeit everyone has different viewpoints, can we at least get started on agreeing with obvious fucker and bullshittery? Call it out and do something about it? We can start with a couple things that have been recommended and already fallen on deaf ears, but I digress. Restore the mental health system so that people who suffer from mental illnesses will be treated before they end up in encounters with law enforcement. That's a no-brainer. Accurately count and report all situations involving deadly force by police officers, and identify the number of times those with mental illnesses are fatally shot in an official report, so lawmakers can't ignore the impact of police fatalities related to mental illnesses. Not only do we need to be actively calling out the system and the structures, but also how it affects us and our perceptions and our society as a whole. Try and listen to someone going through a mental crisis. If you see a story on mainstream media or social media, look into it before you judge. When you Google these folks and you see negative stuff that totally slanders their names and it's not right, it completely shits on people who are the victims, think about that. When you die, I hope thousands of people don't sit on your grave and shit on it every day. Because essentially, that's what these horrible podcasts and news articles, mainstream media posts are doing. And when you agree or listen or go along with it, you are feeding into it. Don't be complicit. Don't be comfortable. One day, you could lose your job or end up in a serious car accident, and before you know it, you're addicted to prescription drugs. Before you know it, you're homeless. You're on meth or heroin. You become irrational, to say the least. You have a bad day. And cops show up. Pop, pop, you dead. Then people say you deserved it. Why? Because you crazy and you had a weapon. Why? Because you got into an argument, a fight, domestic dispute, any or all of the above or similar. Easy narrative for police and others to put you into a further situation to shit on your name. Why? Because the American industrial empire doesn't hold itself accountable for atrocities that it commits. It throws that responsibility off onto anyone or anything else. including its own citizens, environments, and even cultures. Wake up, folks. Stop buying into those bullshit narratives the mainstream media feeds to you about victims of police executions. Look into it. Do your research before you say anything. A picture is worth 1,000 words. But a mugshot doesn't say much of anything. We're all human. Give everyone that respect and don't judge. Show love. Thanks for coming to the Leon Block.
Leon.